For my presentation today, I'll be talking about a GVV case, and in this case it's going to be about the tax return. And in this case there's three people involved. The first one is Brenda, and she's the one that will be preparing the tax return, and her boss is Vincent, and then they have a client that they're preparing this tax return for. Vincent has asked Brenda to prepare the tax return, and she's talked with the client a little bit before about some things that will be happening in that tax return. And the client mentioned to her that he didn't really want her to claim his lottery winnings that he'd won during that year. And so she prepared the tax returns, but she did put those lottery winnings on. And later in that day, or later in that week, Vincent called her into his office to discuss why she put the lottery winnings on after their client had already asked her not to. And she basically explained to him that that was the tax law, that it was necessary. And Vincent went on to explain that the client was rather upset about the whole situation, that he didn't want it put on there. And Vincent told her that he wanted her to go home and think about taking them off, and that other people that worked for him in the past had been okay with doing that, and that he wanted her to go home and think about whether or not she should do the same for the client. And so the first question in this case wants to discuss about Kohlberg's 6 steps of moral development and moral progression. And the first step is a pre-conventional phase, and it involves obedience, and basically obedience and rules that guide the person in their decision. So here in Brenda's case, her obedience is to her boss, but her obedience is also to the laws that are the tax laws that guide the way that she prepares the tax return. And so she has 2 people to obey in this case, and so it's a pretty tough situation that she finds herself in. The second one is going to be more of a self-interest phase, and it goes for satisfying one's own needs. So in Brenda's case, she has needs that she needs to have met by having a job, and she also has moral needs and ethical needs that will satisfy those demands that she has in preparing tax returns to be able to uphold her standing with clients. The third one takes us into the conventional stage, and it has more to do with fairness to others. You kind of leave behind the self-centered stage and you focus on what others think. So in this case, she wouldn't be as worried about the consequences that would happen to her. She'd be more worried about the consequences that would happen to her client, or possibly to Vincent as well. The fourth stage stays in the conventional stage, and it is more where laws come into play. So this is where the tax law would come into play. She has to answer to that over Vincent or the client. In question 2 in the GVV case, it wants to know what the conversation would have been like between you and Vincent in the meeting that he asked you to come to the next day after you had thought about what decision you were going to make on regards to what you were going to put on the tax return. And the conversation would be pretty simple. Brenda's most compelling argument would be that regardless of if the client was itemizing or not, it's the law to put the lottery winnings on the tax return. Even if they had been under a certain amount or over a certain amount, the law requires them to put that amount on the tax return. And then the third question has to do with Brenda in the future. Say that she, this time around, had decided to omit that lottery winning amount from the tax return. In the future, the client comes back and asks her to put just under $5,000 worth of poker tournament winnings off the tax return, because the limit for poker tournament winnings is $5,000 to submit a W-2G. But it goes back to the same fact that regardless of if they receive a W-2G, they need to report those winnings. And it asks if the client came back and asked you to do those same things, what would you do? And it all goes back to integrity and having the courage to stand up to that client and tell them that it was a one-time deal last time if you had said you were going to do that, but hopefully you didn't, and that you were able to stand up for what you knew was right and followed the tax law. In stage 5 of Kohlberg's 6 pillars, it talks about the social contract that this person has between the decision it'll make in society. It ties in pretty similarly with the laws that are based in society on the decision she has to make, but it brings in more of society's views rather than laws. And then the last stage is stage 6, and it is universal ethical principles. And Kohlberg actually had passed away before he finished filming this stage, and it had to do with making the right choice because it was right and not because there was punishments or consequences following it.